Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar brought to you by the Threshold Trail Series and Runna on how to train for an ultramarathon. I'm delighted today to be joined by a couple of very special guests, one of whom is currently plastered across the screen here, and I will be introducing them in just a moment. But before I do, I'm just going to give a couple of seconds as more people join. I can see people flooding in. Great to see so many amazing locations. We've got someone dialing in from Germany, someone from Watford, which is actually where I grew up. Very exciting. People from Reading, Bournemouth, Brighton, which is Threshold's home as well. Fantastic to see so many of you dialing in. So as I said, today's webinar is all about how to train for an ultra, and we are delighted to welcome a very, very special guest to the call, Stephanie Davis. Stephanie is a GB Olympic marathoner, took part in the delayed 2020 Tokyo Olympics representing Great Britain and was the fastest woman across the line. Stephanie, how are you doing this evening?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, good for a Tuesday. I'm excited to be here.
Fantastic. Have you done a run today?
No run today for me. I had a swim session, which is why I look absolutely knackered. It's just the goggle marks. They seem to last for hours.
Okay, well, good to know that you went for a swim because we can discuss some of the cross training on. Steph's PB, for anyone who's interested, because obviously we've got to say it, Steph's PB is 2:27 and change, which is frankly obscene. I'm also joined by a face you'll recognize if you've joined us for the previous webinar, my friend and colleague Alex, who is another member of the Threshold team. Alex, how are you doing this evening?
Very well, thanks, Ed. Yeah, looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Alex, as well as being a member of the team at Threshold, he's also a very experienced ultra runner and is joining us to discuss some of the more ultra-specific aspects of training. So that's who we are. A little bit of a outline of the structure we're going to be chatting through today. So today's webinar is all focused on the physical side of training for an ultramarathon. Sunday just gone was 16 weeks to go until Race to the King, which is the first of our two big ultras this year, taking place on the beautiful South Downs and South Coast. And 16 weeks is the length of many training plans, including our training plans, which I will introduce you to in just a moment. Hence, we thought it was appropriate to dive a little bit into the details of how to train for an ultra. We're going to talk through where you might want to be at this point in time if you're taking on an ultra in 16 weeks, how you want to be approaching the start of your training block. We're going to go into the details a bit of how to structure your training on both a day-by-day basis and also how you want to build week by week. We're going to talk a bit about the three key runs that form the basis of most training plans and the training plans that we have had put together for us by the fabulous team at Runna. We are going to discuss cross-training as well. So that's any kind of exercise apart from running that you can use to supplement your training, as well as the importance of strength work and time in the gym. We're going to briefly chat about training your stomach, which is obviously a very big part of ultra running, is being able to digest food and calories on the run. And then we are going to have an open Q&A. We asked, we let you guys submit questions in advance, and we had an enormous number of questions come in. So we are going to spend a bit of time just answering as many of those as we can get through. We've also tried to sort of seed those questions throughout the webinar today, and we will try and address those as we go. So do drop questions in the chat if you do have any, and we will try and get around to those as we go. Clemmy is on the call, and we'll be seeding those questions as well. So as I mentioned, the training plans that Runna have so brilliantly put together for us, they are available now. If you head to the Threshold Trail Series website and go to the participant hub at the top right-hand menu, you can click through to the training plans. There are a number of plans available for all abilities. They're broken down into beginner, intermediate, and advanced for both 50K and 100K distances. And we've also got them available in miles and kilometers for those of you who like to work in either of those. We also have some walker plans available. Those were put together for us by Claire over at Wild Ginger Running. So if you're planning on walking the entire event, there are training plans for you. But if you do want a personalized plan and you want to get something that's a bit more, as I say, personalized to your particular situation, then you can use the fantastic Runna app, which will generate a completely personalized training plan, including strength workouts that are designed around your setup. And if you use the code threshold, you can get 2 weeks free of Runna, which we highly recommend. So we're going to dive into some of the principles that underpin these training plans, and these principles are sort of built into the plan. So if you follow the plans letter for letter, you're going to be ticking off most of these principles that we discussed today. But the plans are very much a guide rather than a tight script. So let's start by talking about where you might want to be at this point in time if you are taking on an ultra in 2024, particularly if you're taking on one in about 16 weeks. So obviously this is hugely dependent on your goals and also your levels of experience. If you head to our training plans on the website, you'll see we provided some definitions which might be a bit hard to read on the screen here, but I'll outline some of them. So if you're taking on a 50-kilometer event with us and you what we have defined as a beginner runner in that regard is that you are used to exercising, not necessarily running, but you're used to exercising 3 to 4 times a week, and you've completed at least one 10-kilometer run in the past. That might seem like a pretty low bar for a 50K, but we pride ourselves on being a very inclusive event organizer, and our generous cutoff times and our support mean that we see people who meet that threshold. Maybe they've only done a 10-kilometer run in the past and they come and they do 50K. If we go to the other end of the spectrum, all the way up to the 100K advanced runner, we define that as you've exercised 4 to 5 times a week and you've completed at least one ultra in the past, an ultra being anything longer than a marathon. So these definitions are really quite broad, and they are sort of specific to the distance. A 100-kilometer beginner runner is going to be a different thing from a 50-kilometer beginner runner, for instance. But the whole point of outlining these is we think that these distances are more achievable than most people might think. They may think that you have to wait years and years before stepping up, say, from a marathon to a 50K or 100K, but actually we don't believe that's the case. But let's open this up a bit. Steph, in your experience as a coach, do you think people, where do you think people should really be fitness-wise if they're considering taking on an ultra this year?
I think your definitions are kind of spot on for the type of events and what the event offers. I think having some background in exercise, whether that's on another sport, whether it's you're a gym goer, CrossFit, cycling, whatever, is beneficial. So I think being relatively active before you take this on is good. But I think anyone can really go for it. It's just about then being realistic, what you expect from the day and from the run, and not maybe setting your sights too high if you're not really that active and you've never run before, you've not run much before. But it doesn't mean that you can't embark on this training plan and go for it. As you say, like, it's not really, no one's really limited just because it sounds a bit daunting and crazy. And it's definitely achievable.
Alex, you're a relative experienced ultra runner. What's your take?
Yeah, I think I did my first ultra having relatively little experience of other distances. I'd done one marathon before and did that kind of not really knowing what I was doing for the marathon. I think the distances can seem scary, but you just need to approach it sensibly. And I think that's why we offer these 6 different plans across the two distances that should cater for anyone, regardless of where you are in your journey with running. I think, like you said earlier, there are barriers to any form of exercise in any sport, but it's easy to kind of break them down and just approach it in a sensible way.
Yeah, and it's important to note these guidelines that we've outlined here, they are intended to be applicable to you if you want to finish the race. So a 50-kilometer beginner runner, if you've done a 10K in the past, we wouldn't say you could rock up, run 50K and, have the performance of your life or the fastest you could ever possibly go across that distance. That's not going to be the case. But we certainly believe it's possible for you to finish and to finish strong if you meet that threshold. So that's where the plans sort of start from. And hopefully that's relatively straightforward for everyone to follow. So in terms of structuring your training, and again, these are kind of built into the plans. A weekly routine is going to be massively helpful. You can see this is actually the first 4 weeks of the 50K beginner plan. And straight out of the bat, you can see that there's a clear structure to each week. So in this instance, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday are rest days. And we'll talk a bit about the importance of rest in a moment. And then on Monday, Tuesday, and Saturday, you've got easy runs or long runs indicated in green. And then you've got a workout or a structured session on the Thursday. Now, these are guidelines, these training plans. They are not intended to be followed to absolutely, 100% accuracy. But structure and routine are going to be massively helpful for you when you're taking on a challenge like this. Steph, you've run the marathon to a competitive level. How important for your training programs is sort of routine, structure, and repetition when it comes to building fitness?
It's the most crucial thing. I think knowing what you're going to have on each day is just really beneficial. And that might not be the specifics of the session, but just knowing that Monday's going to be an easy day, Wednesday in this case is going to be a rest day, it just helps plan your life and other things around it. And the more you get into the swing of things and into the routine, it's easier then to tick off each day. And just having the training plan there, outlining that structure just helps hold you accountable as well. But sometimes training, like when it comes down to it, it can feel on paper, it might look quite boring because there is a lot of repetition, but that is the key to consistency, and the key to getting where you want to be is just ticking off those sessions and not trying to like push too much, because that's where injuries will occur. It's just staying within your parameters, and you're more likely to do that if you've got a training plan and you have routine and you have the structure. Because doing too much and taking risks will only lead potentially to injuries and not getting to race day healthy. So it's all like, a process, but having the structure in that process just makes it easier. And if you're following a training plan, it's just one less thing for you to think about. You can just switch off and do the runs and not think about, how far should I go today? How hard should I run? That's all set out for you. So it definitely helps kind of motivate me and hold me accountable.
Absolutely. In terms of the as it were, the gaps in the training plan, those rest days, it might be easy to look at those and think, relatively obvious what that means, but I think it's something that might be overlooked a bit. So it would be great to just hear a bit about the importance of rest from your perspective as someone who's performed at that higher level.
Yeah, it is another training day rest, especially it might seem like you don't feel you need them at the start of the block in week 1, week 2. In this case, in this example, the long runs are kind of 8, 10K, but you're going to see some really, really long runs as you progress through your plan. And if you don't have those rest days, then you're not going to recover, you won't adapt, and it will have knock-on effect onto your other sessions. Now, in this example, and the plans that are set out, there are 3 rest days, but I think as well, this is where it would be beneficial to kind of sign up to Runna and have a more individualized plan, because if you're more experienced runner, you might know how much load you can tolerate and you might need less rest days than that. But I would still encourage you always to take 1 rest day a week, because not only from a physical perspective for allowing your body to recover and then absorb the load and then adapt and get stronger and fitter, but it also is just like mentally like a really good reset, because it's quite tiring sometimes following a training plan mentally as well, especially when it does get halfway through the plan and it's getting a bit tougher. And just to have that rest day there just allows you to relax, do something a bit different, switch off from training. So I'd always encourage you to take them. And if you're completely new to running, then this is your first one, then you definitely want those 3 rest days in there.
I've just spotted a bit of a technical question from Phil in the chat, so I thought I'd just address this now. Phil asks, how do I do, for instance, 7-kilometer and hill repeats 3 times 200 meters? So that in each training plan, Phil, there's a key on each page that kind of breaks down how to interpret these workouts. In this instance, 200 meters is the length of the hill repeat. So you do 3 200-meter hill repeats. Hopefully that's cleared that up.
I think as well, the 7 kilometers in that situation is probably the total length of the session.
Yes, exactly.
Once you have the full breakdown of it, it will include your warm up and cool down.
Yes, exactly. So for instance, on this instance, you'd run 200 meters up the hill, jog or walk back down the same distance and do that 2 more times. So you do a total of 600 meters of hard running and 600 meters of recovery inside your 7K run. So hopefully that's more straightforward. We do have some technical questions as well, just that were submitted in advance. Obviously, everyone's got specific situations that they're dealing with, so we're not going to be able to necessarily dive into the details, but there's some broad advice that we can dish out. So Kim asks, can you train for an ultra on 3 runs a week? My gut instinct to that would be yes. I'd be curious to know, Alex, what would be your take on that 3 runs a week?
I think yes is the short answer. I think I would be interested to understand what those 3 runs look like. For me, there's a priority on certain types of runs if you're only able to fit in a lower amount of volume in terms of numbers of runs a week, which a lot of us are balancing and juggling life alongside what for kind of 99% of us is a hobby. So if 3 runs is all that is manageable, then absolutely you can train for an ultra. But I mean, I would say one of those needs to be a long run. Another of those I would say, should be an easy run. And then the third, up for debate probably, but me personally, I would say throw in some intensity into the third one, and then you've got a nice little kind of menu of different stimulus that I personally think is kind of important to any distance, but will help you tackle an ultra. I think if distances, maybe if you're, threshold, we go to 50K and 100K. I think if you're looking beyond that, 100 miles, 3 runs, you might have to step up to a few more. But if you're coming along to a threshold event, I think you'd be all right with 3 runs.
I think it all boils down to what your goals are as well and your level of experience. But the great thing about the Runna app, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Steph, but I believe you can say how many runs you'd like to be doing each week, and it will adjust the plan accordingly.
Yeah, exactly. You can tell the app how many runs a week you'd like to do, and you can also set the schedule yourself, so you can put those runs on whatever day suits you. It will kind of advise what they think's best, but it just means like if a Wednesday rest day isn't actually suitable for you and it's better to take on a Monday, then you can move that around in the app. And all the workouts as well will sync to your watch, or you can run with your phone, and you can put your headphones in and it will talk you through all the paces and things like that. So that's quite handy too.
Yeah, Susan just asked, does Runna feed into Garmin? I think Steph just answered that. Yes, it does.
Yeah.
So obviously day-by-day structure is very important. And then if we zoom out a little bit and look at the week by week, this is actually the sort of weekly mileage of the 50K beginner plan. And as you can see, across the 16 weeks, it builds nice and gradually, starting from just under 30K a week, which I think if you're just starting a training plan and you're really rearing to go, you might be finding that not enough. But the whole point is that you're building gradually and gently, giving your body a chance to adapt to the new stimulus that you're putting through it. The principle of not building by more than 10% a week, it does, of course, depend upon your level of experience. If you are a more experienced runner and you know your body well enough, you may be able to sort of build by more than that. But that principle is certainly going to keep you on the safe side of loading. Also built into the plan, as you can see, are these cutback weeks. So every 4th week, the plan reduces in volume and gives you essentially the weekly equivalent of a rest day. So you'll still be doing a run, and the runs will probably stick to the schedule that you're used to, but the overall mileage will be less, and that will hopefully give your body a chance to recover ahead of building a bit more. And then lastly, if you're not familiar with the concept of a taper, you can see in the last few weeks before the 16, the race week, which is week 16 in gold there, the mileage gradually reduces, and that's called a taper. And usually they take the form of about a 3-week decrease in volume, similar to a rest week, just to let you adjust. So hopefully that gives you a sense of the importance of structure and the fact that structure is built into our training plans, and will help you get to the finish line nice and healthy. Now, Alex kind of alluded to this next point around the 3 kind of key runs that you might want to consider, but we're just going to talk through them one by one, because by far and away the most questions we had submitted in advance was on the last of these 3. But let's start with the easy run, which forms the sort of bread and butter of the week. Steph, you're a faster runner than most of us. What would be your definition of an easy run that everyone could use to apply to their training?
This, like with an easy run, you want to just almost be ignoring the watch. So if you do download a Runna plan, it will tell you kind of uh, a no faster than pace. But you really want to just be going on feel, because it's going to vary day to day depending on how tired you are. But the key thing for that easy run is you want it to feel conversational. So you should be able to go for a run with someone else and be able to have a chat as you're going along. The reason why the pace is going to vary is depending on the terrain, the weather, the elevation. If you're just tired one day compared to another day, it's just going to be slower. And that's why I tell people like not to fixate on a pace. Your easy runs are there just to get you moving, really good for you aerobically, really good for your recovery. They're not a session where you need to push yourself. So if in doubt, just go a bit slower.
Hmm. Do you use things like heart rate, perceived efforts, pace? How do you gauge that? Is it just a matter of over time learning what it looks like?
Yeah, I'd say over time learning. I'm not like a big fan of RPE, of perceived effort, because I find it really hard to kind of dial into what is a 5 out of 10 effort.
Hmm.
Especially if you've only got one pace in a run, I find that quite a hard one. So that's where I would tend to use the conversational thing.
Mhm.
I also do use heart rate for my easy runs because that does just hold me accountable, but it's more that I'm not like bound by that. I'll just be keeping an eye on it. Especially if you're having one of those days where you just don't really know how you're going to feel. But it's just trying to stay relaxed. Like even if your legs feel heavy, some days your easy run pace might be a bit slower. It just vary massively. So I think it's just trying not to get fixated on a specific pace and using things. If you know what your heart rate should be, then yeah, follow that. It's very individual, so I can't tell you what heart rate to aim for. If you do want to aim for RPE, with 0 being rest, 10 being max effort, you want to probably keep it like a 5 out of 10. But I would always dial back to that chatty run. Grab a friend, go for a
Catherine
chat.
Catherine in the chat says that she had a great chat with a sheep the other day just to check that she was running easy. So I think that's a
Exactly.
useful.
Perfect.
I think a good hack that I've found whilst I've learned more about training and how to do easy runs properly is sometimes I'll cover my watch.
Mhm.
I'm not quite ready to take it off and go running without it, but I'll cover it up and just run without looking at any of the data that your watch can give you. Or I have a screen set up on my watch that is just a timer, so no other pace, distance, heart rate,
Yeah.
anything that will allow me to work out how long it's taken me to do that particular mile or kilometer. Literally just a stopwatch. It just helps you run for the reason you're running.
Yeah, and it's worth saying easy runs are easily overlooked, but they are sort of 80 to 90% of most of our training plans in terms of volume, and they're where you're going to build most of your aerobic capacity and spend most of your time in training. So don't overlook them and do run them easy. There's a common adage relevant to the next point, which is that you should run your easy runs easy and your hard runs hard. And speaking of hard runs, let's talk about workouts. So a lot of people, when they're training for an ultra marathon, might be tempted to neglect speed work, and that's fine. If your goals don't center around performance, or you're just not interested in doing it, you can absolutely finish without any speed work. But it might be tempting to not do it because you don't think it's relevant to an ultra, and that's really not the case. Obviously, speed work and workouts will introduce a bit of variety into your training. They'll work different muscles, different energy systems, and they'll have the effect of raising your easy running pace, which is obviously a good thing in terms of getting faster. Obviously, they are more taxing on your body, and so we do recommend limiting your workouts to 1 or potentially 2 workouts a week, but not really much more than that, because you really do need the time to recover from them. We had a question submitted in advance from Serhi, apologies if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, which I thought was a really interesting one, Alex, given your background in both ultras, but also some pretty fast marathon running. What is the most important workout for an ultra? I don't know if there's a one size fits all, but I wondered if you had a take on that.
So definitely not one size fits all. When I'm training for an ultra, I will do more hill repetitions as a workout, whereas I am guilty of not doing that quite so much if I'm training for a flat road marathon. So something like going, I don't know, 2.5 kilometers, finding a nice short and or long hill. So in my training in the past, I've learned that you can get different stimulus from different types of hill training. So short, sharp, 20-second kind of full beans up a shorter hill and then back down. We'll really train that kind of fast twitch, or longer, kind of up to 3. Where my family live down in Cornwall, there are long 6-minute, 7-minute trudges, which, although horrific at the time, you only need to do a few of them and you are getting some real training effect going up and down those. So yeah, I think hills will form more of my intervals when I'm training for an ultra. However, I do like to mix it up. So 1 week I'll do hills, or perhaps 2 weeks on the trot, but then I'll go back to doing something like the standard kind of kilometer repeats. Nothing too complicated. 4 to, if I'm kind of feeling, if I'm in the meat of my training, I'll go up to 10, with anywhere between 90 and 3 minutes rest, again depending on what I'm looking to get out of the session.
I mean, it's worth mentioning that one of the massive benefits of workouts can just be doing something a bit different, Steph. If you're doing a lot of easy running, I can imagine in Olympic marathon training, you are doing a lot of mileage. So to have the chance to just mix up the pace a bit must be a bit of a relief in some ways.
Yeah, I really enjoy the variety of like an interval session, as well as like what Alex was saying. There's so many different types of interval sessions as well, whether it's like short reps, long reps, where you're on a track, whether you're on the hills in a park doing more like tempo loops. I just really like the variety of it. And yeah, it just challenges you a bit more, but also just breaking up the run. It just is sometimes actually a bit easier to get through. Like for me, my worst run of the week is actually one of my easy runs. It's the day after I do my track session. I've worked hard. I'm then so tired the next day, so I always just feel like my legs are like lead. Whereas the session the day before almost feels like a bit easier because you just break it down into intervals and yeah, get through it. So I really, really enjoy them for the variety and just the buzz it gives you. And obviously as we were saying, like the massive fitness benefits, even for an ultra, those sessions, yeah, shouldn't be overlooked.
Absolutely. Apologies, by the way, to anyone who struggled to join for the first few minutes of the webinar. Hopefully we've addressed that issue and it looks like you guys have made it in. So thanks for bearing with us on that one. The last kind of type of run, and the one which, as I said, by far and away we received the most questions about, is of course the long run. It's a vital part of training. It's a big part of training for an ultra. The question that came up the most, and I think it's one we should tackle kind of head on, is how long should my longest run be? It's a really common question. Obviously, if you're going 50k or 100k, the long run can feel like a chance to practice that. I think, Alex, I'll defer to you on this, but I think the short answer from my perspective is that it's kind of the wrong question to be asking. And the reason for that is that your longest to long run is, if you add up all your mileage, probably between 2 and 3, maybe 4% of your entire training. So to spend a huge amount of sort of psychological effort focusing on that run and how that run's going to go and what that run should be, is kind of neglecting, the vast majority of your actual training, which the most important thing in any training plan is consistency rather than any single run. Alex, I don't know what your take would be on that. You've done, up to the 100-mile distance, and what's your take on long runs, and particularly that last long run, how long it should go?
So I wouldn't like for people to get fixated on a number. Which, I mean, I did. The exact thing that I did when I trained for my first ultra, which was Race of the Stones. I felt like I needed to get to 50k, and I got to 50k twice in the build-up. I wanted to get to 50k because I wanted to know what it felt like to tick off half of the distance that I was training for, which was 100K. So for me, it was more of a mental test, primarily, secondary, obviously, physically, to see if I could get to half the distance. But when I talk with when I chat with you, Ed, and when I chat with guys in the office and other guys and girls that I run with, we don't always need to talk about distance. We can also talk about time, especially with ultra marathons. During the last webinar that we did, we had some interesting questions about those who might take on the trail, let's say an hour, hour and a half, if not more, to do 10 kilometers. So, if we're then throwing out the prospect of perhaps running 50 kilometers, that is a huge amount of time to be spent. And you really only get slower as you go further in these things. So let's not fixate over distance. Sometimes just to look at time, go out and spend 2.5 hours on the hills, running in some green spaces, and that will be just as valuable to your fitness and to your kind of mental side of ultra training as it would be to go and just try and hit an arbitrary number. Ultimately, in my opinion, you can, if you've prepared well enough, which doesn't mean hitting 50, 60 kilometers, it means getting to at least 20 miles, you'll get there. It becomes more kind of up here with the ultra game. If you've got it in the legs up to a point, you just need to make sure that you're tuned in between the ears to make sure that you can kind of carry on.
I think it also really boils down to personal kind of temperament and also physical temperament. I mean, a case in point would be you went up to 50K for your first 100K. For my first 100 miler, I didn't run longer than 20 miles in training. And that might sound crazy, but I just knew that if I go beyond that, or if I go beyond sort of 3.5, 4 hours, I'm just really going to take a long time to recover. And that's just me listening to my body and learning how it behaves. Steph, I don't know, what's your take on this? The longest long run. Are we at risk of extrapolating a principle from marathon training, which is that you should do, 2/3 of the distance or something, and then applying that to an ultra? Does it carry?
No, it doesn't carry. And I think, unfortunately, with this, there's just not one answer you can give because it's just so individual. And if you're someone that's new to this, you're better just to err on the side of caution and get to the race healthy and not overcook it in training, because that's where you're going to get fatigued or injured. Whereas, if you just push it too hard, or you have this figure in your head that you think is you need to tick off in order to get there, then you might not. I think if you're a more experienced runner, you'll know what you can handle. So then you can kind of adapt maybe what's in a plan and do what you can do. But I think, again, like one experienced runner versus another is still going to be so different. Like even myself as a professional marathon runner, the mileage I run compared to my competitors is so low. And it's really hard sometimes when you're constantly comparing to other people that you're like, oh, I need to do more, I need to do more. But I've learned the hard way more than once that by taking that risk, I just end up injured and it's not worth it. So I've had to find a different way that I can train and just try and stay in my own lane and stick to that and not think, oh, everyone else is doing X, Y, Z. I should do that too, because I just won't get it to the race if that's the case.
Yeah, 100%. It's very personal. I mean, speaking of elite athletes, another elite athlete in the ultra world, Camille Heron, who I believe has the women's 48-hour record and 24 potentially as well. She has said that she never runs further than 22 miles, which for her is about 3 hours, maybe a bit less. And instead, she focuses on volume and consistency. That's Camille Heron. You're not Camille Heron. So whatever you find works for you, it's deeply personal. But as Steph said, err on the side of caution. The sort of numerical answer is that our training plans all build up to a 32-kilometer or 20-mile long run for the 50Ks and a 50-kilometer or 31-mile long run for the 100Ks. But again, they are purely advisory, and they're based on the fact that we know a lot of people doing 100K will want to have done the 50K in training. If you're going to go out and do that 50K, take it slow. It might take all day. It probably will be much slower than your 50K race pace, as it were. But by no means do you have to do that. I really do think that 32 kilometers, 20 miles is a very, very adequate maximum for most distances. A couple of questions that we had on this. Laura says, what's the best way to build in the long run to increase stamina without going too long and having to build in recovery time? Well, I suppose we've kind of answered that in terms of not overdoing it on the long run. Hopefully that helps, Laura. Lisa says, is it better to train walk/run for long runs for an ultra? Lisa, I suppose that depends on your pacing strategy, but if you're thinking that you're going to be doing a fair amount of walking in the race, then I would definitely say it's a good idea to walk in training. I think you'd agree, Alex.
Yeah, I think even the guys and girls at the front end of any ultra, they're walking.
Yeah,
so yeah, don't be ashamed to be spending as much time as you need walking and hiking as you are running.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of questions that have come in on the chat. Pip says, for 50K, would you recommend doing a double run day? I think maybe in a back-to-back run day, so 20 miles and then 10 the next day. Steph, what's your take on back-to-back long runs? They're quite popular in some circles.
I think for the 50K, it's not essential. If you can do a 20-mile long run, then I think that will set you up well. For the 100K, you potentially want to think about doing it, especially if you maybe don't want to do a 50K long run. It might actually be easier for you to break that into 2 days. But I would still do it like 30-20 rather than half and half, or 35-15, just where you have one that's just a bit of a longer stimulus. And as well, I'd only do it if you're experienced. If you're new to running, don't bother trying it.
Yeah. I think all of our training plans for the 100K, or certainly the intermediate and advanced, they do sort of finish a few weeks out from the race. Before the 50K long run, there is a single back-to-back run. But as Steph said, if you feel like that's going to be a more useful strategy for you than doing a 50K, it's something you can experiment with, but do be careful with it. Okay, so we chatted through long runs. As I said, there was a lot of questions on those. Hopefully we've addressed some of them. We're going to talk a bit about cross-training now, cross-training and strength training. So cross-training is just a fancy way of saying anything that isn't the exercise or the sport that you're training for. So if you're a cyclist, running might be your cross-training. If you're a runner, often the cross-training that people turn to is cycling or swimming, but also strength work, hugely important. We've had some questions come in on this that we'll just jump straight to. So James has asked, what strength training exercise do you complete? How do you fit this into your daily routine? Similar question, what is the single best leg strengthening exercise to promote resilience? Steph, is strength training a big part of your program? What do you recommend to people who are perhaps new to training in a structured way?
Yeah, so it is a big part of my training, and I would do kind of 2 like heavy strength sessions in a week. Unless it's like kind of the 5-6 weeks before, I would whittle it down to 1, because you then really want to be focusing your energy on the running and not having that extra fatigue from strength. The way I do it, and the way I kind of encourage people I coach to do it, is to do your strength day either the same day as your hard run day. So in an ideal world, you could do your hard run in the morning or at lunchtime, and then a bit of strength in the evening. Appreciate 2 sessions a day is not going to work for everyone. So I would then do it the kind of the day after your hard run, but just make sure then the following day is an easy day and it's not another hard run session or a long run. You just want then a recovery day, whether that's rest, an easy run, or an easy cross train, to recover from those 2 harder workouts. Because if you're lifting heavy, then a strength session is deemed to be more of a hard session. If you don't have access to a gym or the time to get to a gym, there is loads of stuff you can do with kind of body weight. I'd probably encourage you, if you're at home, to buy some resistance bands. You can get them for like a $5 off Amazon. And there's then loads of kind of strength routines that you can follow along. At Runna, we actually have that as part of the app as well. So you can tell the app what equipment you have, whether that's a fully equipped gym or it's just at home with a chair and some resistance bands, and it will build a plan for you. In terms of what exercises should be in that plan, I mean, the kind of key Olympic lifts are probably your go-to if you're looking for advice. But again, like, they can be quite specific to you. Like, my strength program is kind of geared towards weak spots that I know that I have, like particularly around my hips. If you're new and you've not been exposed to an injury before, so you don't know what those weak spots are, then you really want to be doing exercises that are going to really give you strong glutes, strong hips, calves as well, I'd say, are the key ones. And if you can work those key muscles as well as your core, then that will kind of set you up well and give you a strong foundation, and hopefully protect you against injury.
I think a really common thing that people struggle with in all sports, but in our sport is being time poor, or at least feeling that they're time poor. And there's the 2 points on the screen here that kind of directly reference that. Sometime in the gym, or indeed at home with the equipment you have, is better than none. I've had plans in the past where I've spent 30 minutes a week in the gym and I felt an enormous benefit from that. And also working with the time and resources you have. This goes beyond just cross training, but also running. Alex, you're a young father. You've got another baby on the way. You've got a busy job. How does all that sort of play into training and hitting the volume that you want to be hitting for your training plans?
Yeah, so it's just about being reactive to life. I said it earlier, I run because I want to, and because it's a hobby of mine that I enjoy, and so it's up to me to make time for that. But it's secondary, obviously, to being a dad to my daughter and a husband to my wife, and obviously performing at work and everything else that makes the world go around. So for me personally, it'll be different for everyone, but my hours at work are 9 to 5. I will train in the morning. I am fine with that. I get up at 6, out the door by 6:30. I'll run for however long I need or want to run on that day, back to take my daughter to nursery, and then into the office for 9. I incorporate gym sessions into my weekly training. They happen at lunchtime. I spend 30 minutes in the gym 3 or 4 times a week. And yeah, that's how it works for me, and that's how I choose to spend my lunch break. But I'm a stronger runner and kind of casual athlete because I go to the gym. It's definitely helping. It's definitely something that coming from a team sport background, playing rugby my whole life before I started running, I've only seen benefits from being able to even fit in, even if you can only go for 10 or 15 minutes, just to do something, move your body, make it stronger just for a short amount of time is better than no time. But yeah, to go back to your question about juggling kind of life with running, it's just about knowing what works for you. Everyone will be different. I have I work well with my wife about when she wants to go out and exercise. When I want to, we kind of have a good thing going on. But it's important to balance this with everyone else that's kind of involved in it in your life.
Alex has been known to run parkrun with a pram.
Yes,
with a child in it, I should say, not just because running.
Yeah, running 2 parkruns sometimes without the child in the pram has been strange.
But yeah, as Steph and Alex both said, it is deeply personal, and we would always advise that if you can get a PT or get a professional to work with you, at least to set up some exercises, because you don't want to walk into a gym and make some mistakes in terms of how you're doing things. You can obviously hurt yourself. Let's talk lastly before we jump out to a Q&A about training your stomach. Again, massively personal, but nutrition and hydration are a massive part of success in ultras. The distances just demand that you do take on calories, and that you do it well. A lot of people will cross the finish line of an ultra, and the success is not really so much to do with their legs holding out as their stomach holding out. It's probably the most common reason we see people drop out of the race. So it's worth putting in some time on it. A few questions came in around what food will be available at Threshold Trail Series events. So we have a couple of nutrition partners, principally High Five, who you can see here on the left, who provide all of our gels, and sort of isotonic sachets and things like that. So all the sports nutrition. We also have Perkia, who provide these very delicious cereal bars, which we are all a big fan of in the office. These are the foods that will be available, as well as things like fruits, crisps, Coke, standard snacks that you'd expect at an ultra. So if you want to train with the food that you're going to be able to get hold of on race day, which is always what we'd advise, never try anything new on race day. These are the foods to look out for. If you head to the website under our partners page, which is under community, you can see pages for each of these brands, and there's discount codes and things so that you can get hold of some goodies. But in terms of the actual nutrition sort of strategy side of things, we had a question here from Dawn. How often should you be eating on long runs? Similar question from Rory. What's the best way to fuel and factor in training to prep your stomach? Alex, we've discussed this a bit briefly in the office, how deeply personal this is. I've run marathons eating only 2 gels, and you've run marathons eating seemingly 100. In terms of like how frequently people should be eating during an ultra, what's your brief take on that?
So I can tell you what I do, like you have kind of set this up, saying it will be different for everyone. I will try. So I set a not an alarm, but a thing that shouts at me from my watch to tell me to take nutrition. On my training runs, every kind of 35 minutes, depending on the intensity. But I will take on, say if I'm fueling with gels, I'll try and take on a gel kind of every 35 to 40 minutes on a particularly long run. I'll give you an example of how I fueled Race to the Stones when I ran it this year. I had a carb mix, so High Five do a kind of a carb fluid mix, 500 mils in each of my soft flasks, and I also had gels as well, and I would try and get through 1 500 ml soft flask per hour, which would give me my carbohydrates, my electrolytes that I needed across that hour, and I would supplement that with 1 gel as well, and that just works. That works for me. There is a lot of science that can go behind fueling, and I know people in this game who will know exactly how many carbs you need, and Steph, you probably do, and I have known, but I know other people who have highs at each aid station or don't fuel at all. So for me, it's making sure I remember to fuel, and that is done through a notification on my watch. And if I'm doing it with just fluid, I'll try and get 500 mils of carbohydrate fueled fluid an hour, or probably about 2 gels an hour.
Steph, at the Tokyo Olympics, were there any pies ingested?
There were no pies ingested. Just gels, and yeah, I had a carb drink as well, which I am not the best at being able to run and drink at the same time, but I did use a lot of water and stuff to put on me because it was very hot. And I'm pretty good at taking my gels. I actually don't ever really forget to take my gels because for me, it's a way that I break up the run. So if I know that I'd like to take my gels every 6 to 7K, for me, I'm just like, right, get the next 6K done. And then I start thinking about having my gel. And I've never had any issues with the gels on my stomach. So it's just, that's always what I've stuck to. I know some people might prefer like little chews or sweets or carb drinks. For a marathon anyway, you're probably not going to take on solid food unless it's a really like a high elevation marathon, a trail marathon. It's going to take you a lot longer. That's a different game. But like for a road marathon, you're probably not going to take on solid food. But it's just what your stomach can handle. Like everyone's very individual. Like I have clients that just really struggle to find gels that work for them. So we try to come up with kind of different approaches and different things that they can fuel with. I'd say if you're using more of a kind of walk run approach, you could definitely introduce some solid food in there and just make sure you're having it at periods where you're walking for a little bit. So it has time to kind of sit properly in your stomach, not jiggle around as you're running. but it is like, try it, practice it from training, practice it from like day one in your long runs. Even if that's just, you've got a 10K long run, train your stomach, have a gel halfway through to see how that settles and see how you go from there. But if you're new to nutrition, I would definitely start off with these products, because if they work for you, it will be absolutely amazing, because you can just carry a little bit less as well on you, and you don't have to worry about not having enough, because you know that these products work for you.
100%. I mean, there's a few questions people had around, you know, struggling to eat beyond 20 miles, cramping, things like that. It's deeply personal, and it is a journey for everyone. I would say from experience, there's something to be said for sort of resilience training on your stomach. My first few, when I was training for my first 50 miler, I did a series of runs each weekend that were sort of 30 to 35K. And the first few, every single time at 30K, my stomach just went, and I couldn't figure out why it was happening. I couldn't stop it from happening. And then after a few weeks, suddenly it just didn't happen. And I can only put that down to my stomach sort of clocking that this is something we do now. We run for this length of time, and we're going to learn to ingest on the run. So there is something to be said for just going through the motions a little bit. But if it's a consistent issue and you are struggling with the same thing happening every time, it's probably worth speaking to a sports nutritionist, someone who's really clued up on the science of this stuff, because it might be that there's some particular issue, you know, to do with the rate at which you dispense electrolytes, all that kind of stuff that is holding you back. But practice really does make perfect. Another thing is to practice running on a full stomach, not necessarily after a curry, but going for a little jog after you've had, you know, a bowl of porridge or some toast or something like that is going to help you simulate what it's going to be like on race day. Don't go out and do a workout on it, but by all means, you know, do a gentle, easy run on it, because actually that's a better simulation of what's going to be like on race day. You're not going to be feeling completely, you know, empty and light on race day. You're gonna have to ingest food on the way.
I would also, just to add to the point that we were talking about with the solid food, because eating solid food does become a thing in ultra marathons, especially when you're getting up to the 100K distance. And I would just say to everyone, use the aid stations to your advantage. So they're there for you to stock up, but they're also there for you to kind of reset. And so what I do with aid stations is I'll go in, I'll take some things to put in for later, but then I'll also keep things that I'll keep out into my hands. And as I'm walking out, so key is walk out of the aid station and use that walking time as time to refuel, restock your energy, basically, and also the hills. So
yeah,
the majority of people will be walking up hills. That is an excellent time to be taking in fuel, especially the solid food, which is very hard to digest if you're running. So use those hills that you'd be walking anyway as a chance to eat. Becomes a lot easier.
Definitely. There's a sort of grammar to ultramarathon calorie intake, which is stuffing your face at an aid station and then a sort of slow, steady drip in between aid stations. But do take advantage of them. And it's good to leave an aid station feeling relatively satiated and that you've got enough energy to carry on to the next one.
Yeah.
Brent asked, alongside food and water, what other kit should we expect to carry, please? For instance, what size vest would be a good investment? So for our races, 50K and 100K, you would certainly not need a vest larger than about 10 liters, and you'd probably be pretty comfortable with a 5-liter vest. The reason for that is that our races take place in the summer, so you're not, although you could obviously encounter poor weather, the risk of it is lower, and you're certainly not going to get hopefully too cold. And also the amount of aid stations that we provide mean that you don't have to carry an enormous amount of nutrition unless you have specific requirements that you know you need and aren't going to be available at aid stations. So I would say 5 or 10 liters is completely adequate. We have people do it with just a waist pack, believe it or not.
Well, I was going to say, to give some comfort on that and not having to worry. I ran Race to the Stones with no pack, with 2 water bottles, so there's enough to kind of look after you on the road.
Absolutely. But if you are expecting to take, if this is your first ultra, you're expecting to take a long time, then obviously carry what you need to be comfortable. I would obviously recommend our kit partner Harrier, who are an absolutely fantastic brand who produce a range of vests, packs, poles, bun bags as well. And if you head to our website, you can access a discount for their stuff, which is absolutely brilliant stuff. We all rave about it in the office. That's Harrier Trail Running. Okay, well, we've reached the end of the structured section of the webinar. If you've got any questions that we haven't covered, please do pop them in the chat. I'm just going to rattle through some that came in advance that weren't necessarily relevant to specific topics that we covered. There's a few here around training specifically as an older woman. So Tessa asks any specifics for women in their 50s. Catherine says, how might training plans best be adapted for midlife/menopausal women? And Charlotte, training as a 61-year-old woman, what's different? Steph, I don't know if you've got a take on this training as an older woman. Do things have to change? What would be your advice?
I think it depends on your experience as a runner. If you're more experienced, then you should have an idea of what you can tolerate and just stick within those parameters. If you're completely new or not that experienced, then you probably want to kind of reduce things down a bit. And if that means having to do a little bit less than what the beginner plan sets out, then you could just aim to kind of do kind of shorter runs, and then your longer run do probably to time rather than to a distance. But I think it really is kind of no different to any kind of training plan. It is going to be individual, and you have to find what works for you. And if you're really finding the running side of things daunting, that's where you can add cross training and get real benefit from offloading and going on the bike, on the rowing machine, swimming pool, elliptical trainer, where you're not having that impact going through your joints, but you're still getting a huge aerobic benefit. So it might be that you decide to kind of replace one or two of your runs with those non-impact sessions, and that will help kind of keep you more robust.
I think for runners, male and female as well, as you get older, from what I understand, strength training does become more and more beneficial to avoid sort of muscle mass reduction. So it might be that you don't do as much mileage as you used to, but you can add in some gym sessions. Aaron Sita, apologies if I've mispronounced your name, says, Steph, you've mentioned you're prone to injury when you're increasing volume. How have you adapted your training volume to suit your needs? Similar question from Emily that was submitted in advance saying, if you're injury prone, is it the end of the world if you have to do less mileage per week than others do?
Yeah, so I only really run kind of 5 times a week, which I know to a lot of people will still sound a lot, but when I compare myself to other elite runners who run kind of 9, 10 times a week,
Yeah.
it is a lot less. And I only really peak my long runs right before I do a marathon, whereas a lot of pro marathon runners can run 32K, sorry, 20 miles as their long run week in, week out. It's just not something I can do. So I never do a double run day. So that's something that a lot of elite runners will do. I'll always do a cross train and a run. And on the days that I'm not running, I'll either have that kind of one rest day, or I'll just have a non-impact day. So that second day of non-running will be cross training. For me, all those cross training sessions are just easy. So they're the same effort as my easy runs, because I want to get the quality from my run sessions, because that's obviously more specific to what I'm training for. But again, like if you find that those harder run sessions are actually what's setting off an injury, then you can still work really, really hard on the bike, the elliptical, and the pool, whatever you choose or what you have access to, and still get really fit from that. And that's how I've got really fit during times of injury, is by keeping active and almost replicating my running program just in non-impact ways. So yeah, I am a huge fan of cross training, of offloading. You can still get really, really great benefits from it. And it is something that you maybe want to add into your training. If you know that you can run 4 days a week, you're going to take a rest day, throw in 2 cross training days, and just start off even for 20 minutes on those machines, nice and easy, and take it from there. But yeah, that's how I manage it.
We've had a few questions about that. Marley says, for rest days, are these full rest or can you cross train, such as swim or hike? I think I would say that comes down to sort of personal preference
Yeah,
and how
and
much
knowing what you can handle. I think if you're someone who's super new and not that experienced, then I would again like err on the side of caution and take those rest days, at least 2 of them. You could maybe use that third rest day to off do something that's offloaded. But if you are more experienced, then yeah, like go for that hike on that rest day. But if you start to feel like it's impacting your run sessions, then maybe just dial it back a bit.
We're really short for time. I just want to get one more question in because I think it's quite interesting. So say that, not able to find it now. Yeah, Rachel says she's running London Marathon, congratulations, and then a 80-kilometer race 4 weeks later. Goodness me. What should I be doing in between in the lead up to train for a PB and an ultra? Similar question, sort of different angle, but Adam says, what's the best advice for a 2-day event? We obviously have the option to run Race to the Stones, the full 100K across 2 days, 2 50K days. So I guess the question really about recovering in between events. Do you have any takes on that? Is it advisable? Are we setting ourselves up to be just absolutely exhausted after doing 2 events so close together, or breaking it down a bit? Steph.
Was that from you, Alex?
Sorry, yeah, it was for you, Steph. Just in terms of doing races close together, I don't know if it's something you got experience of in terms of maximizing your recovery in between them.
So this is a really popular one that we get through Runna all the time. And it's actually something that in an ideal world, I just would not advise.
Right.
Like it just depends on your goals. If I saw some questions coming in, if people are doing London Marathon and then 4 weeks later they're doing an ultra.
Yeah.
Now, if you're using that London Marathon as a prep run for your ultra, fine. Just keep following kind of like a training plan after. You want to take probably at least 3 to 5 days of rest or cross training or nice walks to recover from that marathon. But if you've gone really hard in that marathon, that's going to take a lot out of you. So I would actually advise like you take kind of 5 to 7 days completely off and recover. And then you've got 3 weeks till your event, and it's just about ticking over. It's just about reminding your legs how to run. Don't fixate too much on having to get in another super long run. If your body's feeling up to it, then you can, but you're going to want to listen to your body, because how one person recovers from a hard marathon, if you're going for a PB or close to your PB, whatever that is for you, is going to take a lot out of you. So you just want to be mindful of that. But if you're just using it as like a training run and you're wanting to kind of get the distance and the time under your belt, but you're taking it a bit easier, then you're more likely to recover better. So you won't need as much time off.
Fantastic. Well, we've run over by a few minutes, so I just want to say a massive thank you to Steph for joining us. It's been super interesting and such an honor to chat to you this evening. So thanks so much for dialing in this evening.
I've loved it. Yeah, it's been great.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for dialing in. Hopefully it was helpful. The recording will be shared with everyone and posted to our YouTube channel, so you can listen back for all those top tips. So thanks, Alex, and thanks, Steph.
Perfect.
Thanks,
Good
guys.
luck everyone with your training.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. Bye.